As the Money Burns is an original podcast by Nikki Woodard. Based on historical research, this is a deep exploration into what happened to a set of actual heirs and heiresses to some of America's most famous fortunes when the Great Depression hits. Each episode has 3 primary sections. Section 1 is a narrative story. Section 2 goes deeper into the historical facts. Section 3 focuses on contemporary, emotional, and personal connections. Story recap. Barbara Hutton and Doris Duke finally made their big debuts, but it is Louise Van Allen who snagged her prince. As others grow hungry, some elites rethink their priorities. Now back to As the Money Burns. Critic's Choice. Despite her own circumstances, one hostess continues her duties in supporting the arts. The show must always go on. Section 1. Story. A few rows back in a dark auditorium, a small man with spectacles sits in anxiety watching the performers on stage rehearsing the new opera, Peter Ibbetson. The former music critic turned composer Deems Taylor hopes for a second chance after his initially successful 1927 King's Henchman faded quickly. At first hailed as America's greatest opera, it's not often that an American composer's work is presented at the Metropolitan Opera House. Would Deems be able to pull off a second and even bigger success? The critic within him is daunted by the task. This new work is based on the 1891 George du Maurier novel, Peter Ibbetson. It's an ambitious piece mixing musical elements, all but melodies. The pressure is on. Deems is a former newspaper New York World music critic and commentator. Crossing to the other side is both a dream and terror. Commissioned in 1929 for another American opera at the Met, Deems started work right away, but twice abandoned other stories that did not lend to the fully operatic experience. What a cast! Canadian tenor Edward Johnson in the lead role of Peter Ibbetson. American baritone Lawrence Tibbett as the villainous uncle Colonel Ibbetson. And Spanish lyric soprano Lucrezia Bori as Mary, Duchess of the Towers. A 1930 Time cover girl, Lucrezia Bori was the guest of honor at Supreme hostess Cobina Wright's luncheon back in October 1930 before the Met's season opening. From her new apartment, Cobina will throw another party for Deems' opera along with Noel Coward's play, a highly coveted invite already covered in the papers. Meanwhile, Cobina scours the newspapers fearing another potential gossip item might appear about her husband William May Wright, aka Bill. She avoids the blatant gossip rags, knowing all too well the horrors contained within. But still, she must at least glance to provide more lively commentary for the upcoming party. At last, she stumbles across an article in the Miami Herald detailing the attitudes of her husband towards marriage. Correction, her first, now ex-husband, writer Owen Johnson. A short marriage over before World War I and the hot love affair with Jimmy Cromwell in Paris. 3 times a widower, Owen is on marriage number 5 and claims all marriages should have an expiration date of 5 years. Cobina chuckles, then sighs. 2 creative artists married with volatile fights. Owen would vanish for a time, leaving Cobina alone with her 3 stepchildren. It was the first time she put aside her dreams in pursuit of love. She would end up in Reno for a divorce, then back on stage. Up in the Met's Diamond Horseshoe, Cobina revisits familiar grounds. Calmly, she watches Deems fretting below as she elates in hearing the notes being hit. Oh, how she misses performing every time she gets near a stage. It never truly leaves the blood. As she listens, it all brings her back to the early days of when she first came to New York and met the brilliant Owen Johnson, her stage dreams, and his ardent courtship. The former Oregon pioneer girl put on fancy and flamboyant, sophisticated European airs, insistent she was dedicated to her art. Undeterred and slightly smitten, Owen would take her to his father, another famous writer, Robert Underwood Johnson's salon, and there Cobina met many of New York's society and artists, including Damrosch, Toscanini, Eleanor Roosevelt, and even former President Teddy Roosevelt. Once Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla were highly involved in a conversation in the corner. Glittering among these notables, Cobina learns to listen emphatically and on occasion shows off her vocal talents to acclaim. She is, however, warned that her youth and beauty will be a downfall to her talent, as they will afford her opportunities and distractions away from the tireless work needed for her ambitions. Glancing around the ornate work inside the Met, Cobina remembers Owen's earlier encouragement of her operatic pursuits, when operas and the arts flourished shortly before World War I. Italian Puccini's Madame Butterfly at the Met against the scandalous Salome performed at the brief rival Manhattan Opera House by her mentor, Mary Garden, who warned the young Cobina that to be successful at opera, one must give up everything, especially marriage and family. Instead, Cobina gave up opera for love, not for Owen, whom she left and returned to pursue the arts in Paris, but for Bill to become Mrs. William May Wright and have his child, their lovely daughter, little Cobina. It was a beautiful life until the crash shattered the underbelly. Now Cobina wonders if she could return to the stage. She sings from time to time at a recital or private party, but she never made it to the Met. Dreams so long ago, so fresh and anew, always bubbling under the surface. All the operas, all the performances, players rotate. Once the hero, next the villain, son, then father. Understudies, starring roles, supporting roles, same themes, same roles, new interpretations, different conductors, the passages of time. Orchestra players may become composers, talent becomes commentators or fundraisers. And that is on the stage. The audience can be just as steadfast or drastically altered. Marriages, divorces, fortunes made and lost. The eternal march of time. Everything changes, nothing changes. The endless loop of history repeating itself. How replaceable all things can be. Cobina's world dizzyingly spins around her. The empty seats of the Met fill with people enthusiastically waiting for the brand new opera. Saturday, February 7th, 1931. Peter Ibbotson premieres at the Met. It's a sensation from the first 16 notes to the final curtain call. Ambitious and bold in range, highly praised, repeat performances over the years to come. A testament to the American ability to contribute to music. The famed line from the main title character, Peter, "Life is the dream, death is the awakening." Another sensation over the next few weeks, Noel Coward's play, Private Lives, takes Broadway by storm with co-star Gertrude Lawrence. The story of a divorced couple reunited while both are on their second honeymoon and the chaos that ensues. Supporting roles of the second spouses are performed by Jill Esmond and Laurence Olivier. Deems and Noel will be the honored guest at Cobina's party at her new home at 322 East 57th Street, not too far from the East River and Sutton Place. Tallulah Bankhead, Fred Astaire and his sister Adele Astaire, Gertrude Lawrence, Sir Guy Standing, Mrs. Auchincloss, and Mrs. Zabriskie are among the guests. Once rumored to have slept on the beaches in Central Park, Noel Coward is now a critical darling, a popular wit, and a regular guest of the Rites. He once disappeared from their lovely Sands Point home to escape Bill's loud snoring via milkman, but returned later. All the guests are familiar and regulars too, always willing to see who else is at Cobina's parties. Hint of a rumored event comes with an onslaught of calls of those waiting to get in. Artists, intelligentsia, and blue bloods mingle in formal and informal fashions. Still nothing is as grand as her circus ball. Will she ever throw another one? Oh, the good and fun times she used to have, all before the crash left so many in its wake. Cobina fights off the encroaching numbness of despair as her guest merriment fills the air. Longtime friends ask if she's all right, as Cobina forces back tears. For their party, the Bohemian Rites are touted for taking over the role now left vacant by the newly married Condé Nast. Only no one is fully aware how dire their financial predicament is becoming. Will Cobina find herself eating at one of the many soup kitchens? Will they be sleeping on benches in Central Park too? Will their story be riches to rags? The whirl of life around her, the same parties, the same people, new and different. Some more haunted than before. No one truly certain of their fates, and desperately trying to fool any critics among them. Section 2, History and Historiography. Without a doubt, part of the fun of this series is the continual overlap with notable people from all walks of life. One could never tell nor truly be surprised when someone noteworthy pops into the story. Deems Taylor was popular in New York society long before his two operas. He had associations with one elite 1920s literary circle, the Algonquin Roundtable, a group of celebrated wits that gathered for lunch frequently. Founding member Robert Benchley's son, Nat Benchley, refers to Deems as the Dean of American Music. Deems could have also been referred as a friend of Dorothy. However, that special implication might not have been what it means today. For a short period, he was the boyfriend of the vivacious wit, poet, satirist, and critic Dorothy Parker, one of the primary Algonquin regulars. Unrelated, the friend of Dorothy phrase might have appeared in the 1909 sequel novel, The Road to Oz, and the gay connotations associated with Dorothy came later as a result of Judy Garland, who played Dorothy in the 1939 Wizard of Oz film. As he ran in the circle of highly notable people, Deems was asked for a recommendation by the Met for someone to compose an American opera. He proposed himself, hence his first opera, The King's Henchman, in 1927. That immediate success was then staged 16 times within 3 seasons at the Met until 1929 and toured 46 cities in 1927 and 1928. It was the first live opera broadcast on CBS Radio in September 1927. A few more performances in the late 1930s occurred before fading into oblivion. Now in 1931, Deems would tend fates, critics, and audiences with Peter Ibbotson. It would be a far larger success from a work that was derived from an already popular work. The latter opera, based on the popular novelist George du Maurier, whose other Gothic novel, Trilby, gave us the iconic character Svengali, a man who seduces, dominates, then exploits the title character Irish girl Trilby as he transforms her into a famous singer. The character himself would be turned into multiple films titled Svengali, played in 1931 by famous actor John Barrymore, and in 1983 by Peter O'Toole. As for Peter Ibbotson, du Maurier's 1891 creation would have many incarnations. First, it was adapted as a play in 1917 with John Barrymore and his brother Lionel Barrymore playing nephew and uncle. Constance Collier played the female lead Mary, Duchess of Towers. Later, Constance would write the libretto for Deems Taylor's opera, and much of the opera staging would come from the play. The play itself would later be adapted for radio in 1939 for the CBS radio series The Campbell Playhouse. Orson Welles played the title role, and other cast members include Helen Hayes, Ray Collins, and Agnes Moorehead. Du Maurier's children and grandchildren also achieved their own critical success. Son is actor Gerald du Maurier, who was made more famous with his association to J.M. Barrie's plays, premiering both in 1902's The Admirable Crichton and in 1904 in the dual role of George Darling and Hook in the play Peter Pan. From Gerald, George's granddaughters are painter and artist Jean du Maurier and writers Angela du Maurier and Dame Daphne du Maurier, the latter of Hitchcock fame. Also through George, daughters Sylvie, Lou, and Davies, along with 5 grandsons, were the inspiration behind J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, both the 1904 play and the 1911 novel. Previously, I've mentioned the complications of reconstructing this era, the constant battle with people misremembering chronology of dates, corrections in names, incorrect associations, plus rumors and scandals, along with truths and lies. Entangled webs tripping me up while trying to unravel and clarify. This is the tricky part of memory, but the beauty of this format and the method of story. I might revisit the same scenario from a different angle or perspective when needed. When I wrote episode 24, The Last Party, I was struggling with the chronology and precision of dates in Cobina Wright's autobiography published in 1952. I couldn't verify the date of the party, but it felt extremely close to the crash. That episode was recorded in February 2021, during a very busy period, and thus I wanted a very focused episode featured on an immediate realization and feelings involving a significant and swift loss of fortune. Later in December 2021, I found a newspaper article detailing a party she threw with similar names. Cobina threw lots of parties with overlapping guests. Now in January and February 2022, I'm reading out all the details of the February 1931 article. And now what looks like might be the same party, now verified over a year later. Other details are becoming confusing as other elements of the story surface. She claims the realization and party was on Friday, while the newspaper articles indicate Saturday. Of course, for whatever reason, elements could have blended together either due to blurring memories or the need for more concise retelling of events. What is very clear and undisputed, Deems Taylor was commissioned to write a second work for the Metropolitan Opera in 1929, for which he eventually delivered Peter Ibbetson in February 1931 to critical success. No matter which day Cobina threw that party, it is inevitable she learned from her husband, Bill Wright, that they had lost their fortunes before a big social event. A secret they will keep a little longer until other factors eventually expose their situation very publicly. This is why I stress the importance of emotional facts in telling these tales, because it's pulling back the layers to get to the experience of going through these events, and this specific date detail might be superfluous to overall timeline of Cobina Wright's life, because essentially, her life spirals out of control over the next few years. There will be other details and facts to uncover, both emotional and more concrete, that will have a larger implication in why our characters make their choices, and how those choices impact the rest of their lives. Section 3, Contemporary and Personal Relevance. It's amazing how this one period of time yields so many links to the present. It's like watching a favorite old film or television show and uncovering another connection. An endless loop that grows wider and wider as it becomes more encompassing. Within the arts, there is always the debate and conflict between being a critic's choice or popular darling. The former praises talent and skill, while the other brings monetary rewards. The goal, of course, is to be both, and yet that is definitely far more challenging and difficult to do. Popular and beloved works always find a way to be revived and remade over and over, sometimes to both critical and commercial success. While Deems Taylor's operas were initially successful and highly praised, they have not lasted as popular into modern times. However, he made another unmistakable contribution. Deems would serve as the master of ceremonies in the Disney's 1940 film Fantasia, and Deems also assisted in selecting the musical scores, including at the time the then controversial Sacre du Printemps, Rite of Spring. The controversy stemmed from the earlier ballet depiction by famed Russian dancer Vaslav Nijinsky in the 1913 performance, with highly sexual and vulgar choreography dominating and obliterating Stravinsky's score. In contrast, the beautifully animated Fantasia was a hit, illuminating the music and inspiring many musicians since then. Ironically, Stravinsky hid his distaste of the cinematic adaptation. Like her grandfather, Daphne du Maurier would have great success from adaptations of both a novel and short story, which were converted into popular Hitchcock films, 1940's Rebecca and the 1963 The Birds Respectfully. Rebecca was remade by Netflix in 2020 with Lily James, Arnie Hammer, and Kristen Scott Thomas. And let's not forget, of course, the Barrymore overlap. The long-reigning acting dynasty comes down to John Barrymore's granddaughter, Drew Barrymore, whose range has grown from child actor to female producer to now daytime talk show host. And finally, there's the highly popular and critical success of J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan and its countless variants, including the film depicting its origin and inspiration in 2004's Finding Neverland with Johnny Depp, Kate Winslet, and Freddie Highmore. It seems the further we go, we inevitably return to the same things, same stories, interconnected through time and imagination. Last week, HBO premiered The Gilded Age by Julian Fellowes, the era when many of the fortunes inherited by our characters were made. For those wanting more of that time period, I'd like to point out a few Instagram accounts featuring the era and glorious photographs of people and buildings. Mansions of the Gilded Age on Instagram and Facebook is cultivated by historian and architect Gary Lawrence, who also runs the Gilded Age Society Instagram account and leads many webinars through the New York Adventure Club, www.nyadventureclub.com. Gary is a master of details, from the elements used in creating the various buildings to their inevitable demise and relocated relics. Another lovely Instagram account, Gotham's Gilded Age, features stories involving scandals, scoundrels, and secrets from the era. Wonderful period photos displaying the fashions, personas, and locations. If you want a live experience or commentary while watching HBO's The Gilded Age during its Monday 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific debuts, please join their chats at Mansions of the Gilded Age, the Gilded Age Society, and Gotham's Gilded Age. Next, when we return to As the Money Burns, heiresses must always fight off fortune hunters willing to break their hearts for money. But there is another heir who presents a whole other level of danger. Until then. As the Money Burns is an original podcast written, produced, and voiced by Nikki Woodard based on historical research. Archival music has been provided by Past Perfect Vintage Music. Check out their website at www.pastperfect.com. Please come visit us at As the Money Burns via Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Transcripts, timeline, episode guide, and character bios are available at asthemoneyburns.com.